Yeah. Well, I mean, you also point out that Dean, being, a kinder person, but also a little less strident or strong as a character, he had this idea that he wasn't supposed to feel jealous. So he really didn't know what to do with the feeling towards his brother, like you said, because they were both, in a sense, competing for the attention and affection of Edie, though he had married her. So that whole role of jealousy that played out differently between Dean and then her second husband, Gary.
Yes, exactly. And when Dean says he has felt jealousy, but he hasn't expressed it. That's what he had difficulty with. And so I think it happens that sometimes Edie has perceived that as a lack of interest on his part. And then it is particularly difficult for him to show that jealousy because it's his twin brother of whom he's jealous.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
Gary has no problem expressing his jealousy, and it comes out in one particularly violent act. But he thinks that if he feels jealous, that it's Edie's fault. Mm-hmm. And so he feels jealousy, he feels rage, and he puts that on his wife, about whom he feels very possessive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, the common element in these dynamics is Edie. And how do you see her developing through those three stages that you mentioned? The first one, which pretty much lined up with when Dirty Dancing, that movie, was filmed, and so people can kind of relate to I don't know what things were going on at that time, and then the mid '80s, late '80s, and then 2007. So, how do you feel about her character development? Were you happy with how she ended up?
Yes, even if she wasn't always happy with it. But I think it is. I think it represents a movement toward self-realization, even if Edie wouldn't necessarily use that term herself. But she wants to be someone who defines herself rather than someone who is defined by others. In the third section of the book, she's coming closer to a sort of contented life, and then it is disrupted when her granddaughter comes to visit, and her granddaughter comes trailing a pair of ne'er-do-well brothers. She has a relationship with one of them, and it's a dangerous relationship. And there's a point at which Edie has to come to her granddaughter's rescue, and it's a dangerous expedition for a number of parties.
For sure. And that brings up a couple of things for me. One is the whole element of it repeating through the lineage from mother to daughter to granddaughter, and even if it almost bypasses the daughter. But also, Edie, because it has to do with their love relationships with their partners, there's a point where Edie said, "When I was young, I wanted to love, but got sex. Later, when I wanted sex, I got love." It just kept going back and forth. So there's that interplay for Edie herself in her relationships, but it seems to be passed down in the generations, that same dynamic.
Yes, it does. And, it would be wonderful if we could always pass on the wisdom of our experiences to our children and our grandchildren, but it doesn't often work out that way. And Edie tries. She has some lessons she thinks she can pass on to her granddaughter, but doesn't have much luck.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's not for her lack of trying. There's almost a stickiness or an addiction or something, maybe it's pure immaturity or lack of love, unconditional love in the granddaughter that lets her make the choices she does in the end.
I think you have something there. Indeed, she does not have a particularly good relationship with her mother, and her father is living in some remote location. The family can't even locate him. So certainly she's looking for something that she has been unable to find in her own home situation.
Now, I know you mentioned the journeys that go with each section, and what it made me think of was whether these were journeys away from something or journeys to find something, like towards something. Did you have that in mind when you wrote those, or was it mostly a vehicle for conversation?
I didn't have that in mind, and yet that sounds so good. I'm going to go ahead and claim that I had that in mind all the time. That's very good. Yeah, I think that the journeys had purpose, but of course the purpose isn't realized until you reach the destination. So things have to happen along the way, and I think in the journeys in that book, you're in the car, you're enclosed, it's going to be for a certain period of time, and I think some intimacy will often emerge during those journeys that otherwise would not.
That's for sure. Yes, that's true. Yeah, either something happens or it doesn't, and that in itself is very telling.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So kind of as we wrap up here, would you say, looking at the timeline and what Edie went through and seeking her identity as an individual, not just in relation to others, how do you think that might be interpreted today by readers, where we live in this instant gratification, social media, here I am, selfie society?
That's a really intriguing question, because of course the selfie does have to do with identifying the self. Here I'm taking my own picture. I'm in control of my identity. And of course, one of the struggles that Edie has throughout her life is that she has not been able to establish an identity of her own. Other people keep imposing an identity on her, and it is for their purposes rather than for hers. Maybe we are much better at establishing an identity in this world now. I hadn't thought of it that way. I think selfies are usually regarded as something sort of trivial and superficial, but maybe they are a way that we get to say, as you just said, here I am.
Wonderful. Well, it's definitely a provocative book, and I have to admit, I actually read it in one sitting. It was an easy read because it was so engaging, and flipping the pages because you had to find out what was going to happen was so easy. So thank you for that. Not every book is
you're welcome. Thank you.
Delight to consume. So Larry Watson, how can people get a hold of you or get a hold of the book?
Well, independent bookstores are certainly a place where the book can be purchased or can be ordered. It's available through Amazon as well. And I have links to some of these at my website, which is larry-watson.com. But just Google Larry Watson and you'll find your way to me.
Wonderful. Super. Well, we're so grateful that you took time out to chat with us today about your latest creation. You have something else in the works already?
I'm always working on something. I've said that if I finish a novel on Tuesday, I'll start a new one on Wednesday. So I'm working on something else. It's too soon to know whether it will amount to something, but it's keeping me busy.
Fantastic. And we do want to remind our listeners, too, to look up the movie when it comes out from November, Let Him Go, featuring Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, but written by Larry Watson. So thank you so much for being here. And I want to thank our listeners as well for being with the show this week, and hope you gained some new insights, tools, strategies, and had a new insight about legacy through the story, The Lives of Edie Pritchard. So thanks for being with us on the SOB Radio Network and Living Legacy Leadership. And do look up my business website, GameChangerThinking.com, see what else is going on. Thank you so much. And do remember, the life you live is the legacy you leave. Bye-bye now.